Hello folks, this is Randy Turpin. Welcome once again to Kingdom Conversations. Today we're bringing you part 4, the concluding part of the Leadership Intensive that I conducted a few weeks ago in Summerville, Georgia. At this point in the presentation, I was talking about the importance of making people a priority in our work. So here we go. I'm going to take you directly into the audio of our concluding session. The Bible is full of passages that talks about the value of people. Have you ever done a study of the one another passages of the Bible? Where the Bible says like love one another, honor one another. That is a powerful Bible study to get into. Because here's the thing, God did not design the Christian life to even work properly. Solitary. I call it solo mode. It's not even designed to work. The greater things of destiny and of eternal purpose are accomplished in community. When our lives are connected with one another. No, it's just me and Jesus. No, it's not just you and Jesus. It's you and Jesus and everybody else that's connected to Jesus. We are a community of faith. We are a family. The Bible, here's just several one another statements, and I don't have time to give you all the references, but you've heard these. Love one another. Honor one another above yourself. Encourage each other. I want to say a word about encouraging others. This has everything to do with doing more of what matters. This matters. Encouraging people. Think about what the word encourage means. The word courage is there. When you encourage, you are imparting courage into a person's life. When a person is discouraged, that means that somehow courage has been sapped right out of them. It takes courage to live this Christian life. It takes courage to step into your destiny and to fulfill major life purposes. A discouraged person will not fulfill their purpose. So you and I are needed to encourage them, to get the courage back into them, to fulfill what God has given them to be and do. And sometimes we need to be the recipients of that too, don't we? Spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Yeah, my job is to kind of prod you along here just to be the best you that you can be. Key number 10, stay positive. Well, listen, I have found that negativity accomplishes very little. We are a redemptive influence. I'm not talking about a culture in which people aren't allowed to suffer or to express their suffering, is what I'm saying. But ultimately, when it comes to leadership, we need to try to keep things on a positive note. Thinking victoriously, thinking confidently. And my dad brought me up with this expression. I think it's actually on the dedication page. Let me see. Yeah! There you are, Dad. To my father, Jim Turpin, who taught me there's no such word as can't. But Dad, I can't. I said, there's no such word as can't. He always kept me thinking in the realm of possibility and tapping into whatever potential that God had given me. You know, we just need to get more into that positive mindset. I say to people, get your hopes up. And people sometimes say, don't get your hopes up. I say, get your hopes up. A hope is the confident expectation of a favorable outcome. We sometimes use the word hope in a different way. We talk about hope in the I hope so kind of hope. People say, well, I hope so. What they really mean is I doubt it. They don't mean hope at all. Okay. But hope in the biblical sense, well, actually in the language, in the Greek language, the word for hope originally just meant expectation. It could have been an expectation for something bad or something good, either way. Christianity got a hold of the concept of hope and it converted it entirely to the expectation of good, of a favorable outcome. Steve Backlund, who's one of my mentors in ministry, he's out at Bethel Church in California. He made this statement. He says, our hopelessness about a problem is a bigger problem than the problem. Another thing, he likes to quote Francis Frangipane. Anybody hear Francis Frangipane? Francis Frangipane's famous for making the statement that in any area of your life where there is not glistening hope, he uses the expression glistening hope, it may be evidence that you're believing a lie in that area of your life. And if you're believing lies, the lies of the enemy, that's potentially a stronghold area. It needs to be broken. Our God's a God of hope. And may God just revive a sense of hope within us. We're talking about being positive here in our leadership. So we are people then, if leadership means influence, then we want to bring an influence of hope into hopeless situations. And without being judgmental of people's negativism or them being downcast, finding a way for a moment to empathize with their pain, but then knowing the objective is to get them back on the solid ground where there is hope, where there's love, where there's joy, where there's all those virtues of a positive, victorious life. Does that make sense? All right. There's so much more I usually say on this. But your words, the words you speak are so instrumental in this. James chapter 3, verse 4 talks about the work of the tongue. He says, James 3, verse 4, or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boast. The way you talk, it's the direction you're going. It's like the rudder of a ship. If you're wondering where your life is heading, listen to the way you're talking. That's where you're going. If you're just always negative, you're going to end up with negative results because that's where you're heading. Sometimes if I just want to help somebody, I'll just sit and listen to them talk for a while, and I'll pick up. I'll discern reoccurring things they keep talking about, and I can pretty much respond saying, this is where I see your life heading. Based solely on the way they're talking. And that's always for the purpose of doing something redemptive on that, not just to condemn them, but let's just get some heart change going on here. Or maybe you just need to be even speaking differently in a way that aligns more with God's purposes in your life. So if you want to know what direction your life is taking, listen to yourself talking. Did you know also that as you talk, that the brain also organizes itself around the words that you're saying? You reinforce thought patterns with your words. I mean, scientists tell us this. Carolyn Leaf. Anybody hear of that writer, Carolyn Leaf? She's really great in talking about the physiology of the brain and how repeated thought patterns and repeated speech patterns actually cause the neural connections in the mind to hardwire. According to Dr. Leaf, she says it takes about 21 days, isn't it? Yeah. I think so. Something like 21 days to break those negative patterns. If you're very intentional about it, that even if those neurons are hardwired, you get a rerouting of those thought patterns, then that goes back to its previous state. Key 11 is define and enforce boundaries. I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but we need to know when to say yes, when to say no. Boundaries is where you define your time, you define your space, you define your resources. You somewhat define how you're going to respond to demands on your time, demands on your space, demand on your resources. And you have to negotiate that and manage that. Otherwise, this is what's going to happen. If you don't define those boundaries, then people will be sapping from you things that you might be needing later for a more worthy reason. So it's important to define boundaries. Otherwise, you're going to get distracted from what matters most. Key number 12 is take charge of your time. If you don't take charge of your time, believe me, somebody else will take charge of it for you. I try to do this. This is about time management, if there is such a thing. Some would argue that there's no such thing as time management. Because you can't really, technically, you can't manage time. I mean, no matter what you do, time just still does this. Tick, 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 tick. You're not actually going to manage time itself. But, yeah, how you are utilizing the time you're given. I mean, you have as much time as the President of the United States. You know that? You have as much time as the Queen of England. It's how we utilize what has been given. And so the key is to prioritize your life within the time you're given. And let me just talk about some practical things. I think of my day as being divided into 3/3, morning, afternoon, and evening. Let's just assume that I'm sleeping from midnight to the other part. Okay. But in terms of the active portions of the day, I will give myself to ministry or to my vocational work in 2 of those thirds. The other third I reserve for personal benefit or the benefit of my family. Okay? So what that means is if I've got a heavy morning in ministry and afternoon in ministry, I'm going to make sure that that evening is personal time. The final third. You follow what I'm saying? There, I've reserved 1/3 for personal use. Or if I know I've got a heavy afternoon and a heavy evening, then I reserve the morning for personal time. Here's the thing. Those of us who are leaders in ministry, we've got the adrenaline, we've got the sense of calling and the vision. I can take on all 3/3. Come on, let's do it. Yeah, but does your family have that same grace? Or are you going to end up with a single wife? You know, that kind of thing. You've got children, but they feel like orphans. You know, that kind of stuff. You don't want to make that sacrifice. Anybody here guilty of, at some point in your life, being a workaholic? Anybody here hear of this thing called adrenaline? You ever hear of this thing called catching your second wind? You're pressing hard through a project, and all of a sudden, you feel like you're about to collapse, and all of a sudden, you catch that second wind. Whoa! Man, what's that? That feels good. It's like a drug. Adrenaline sure feels good. It's addicting. It really is. Overworking is addictive. I've been in environments where overworking is praised. So dividing the day into thirds helps. Key number 14 is get it done. Amen. Get it done. Now, the way this point ended up in here, it came out of a conversation with my son-in-law, my daughter's husband. He saw how I was being so consumed with projects that I was overworking. I am a hyper-perfectionist. I have a tendency to be such a hyper-perfectionist that I want to make sure the plan is just so perfect that by the time I get the plan perfected, it's no longer relevant to what we're dealing with. It actually bogs down the whole system. Hyper-perfectionism, it might be good for a brain surgeon. Listen, let me tell you. If the guy's doing surgery in my brain, I don't want him to have an attitude, well, let's just get this done. No, I want that guy to be a perfectionist. But not everything is worthy of being a perfectionist about it. Some things you just need to just get it done. And there's times when I have to stop and say, I know there's a lot more I could do to perfect this, but we do just need to get this out the door and get this project moving forward. A lot of times I find it's more than adequate, you know. Thank God for a spirit of excellence, but there's a difference between a spirit of excellence and hyper-perfectionism. Right? So, get it done. That's a key to productivity. Remember, I'm answering the question from the college professor that says, how do you accomplish so much? I've learned to just have a get-it-done mentality about most things. Key 15 is something that we're going to skip over, but it's worthy of you reading it. Multi-purpose, what you do. A lot of the things that you're doing can be applied in various applications. Now, I'll just use this illustration. Elon Musk. Anybody follow SpaceX and all this stuff? I'm fascinated with all that. You know, he came up with this Starship idea. You ever been following that at all? I mean, he's actually building the thing. It looks like it's right out of sci-fi. It looks like a Buck Rogers thing. You know, he's landing these boosters and everything. Incredible what's happening. Well, what he's done, he thought about the fact, you know, NASA's trying to come up with one type of spaceship for getting to the moon, another type for getting to Mars, another type of spaceship just getting satellites into orbit, another for this and that. Why not just make one spaceship that does it all? Okay, and that's why he's developing what he calls Starship. And it's quite an impressive project. That's one illustration of multi-purposing what you do. Think in terms of how can this project we're working on benefit not just the immediate need at hand, but other situations. Now, key number 16 is embrace the laws of harvest. How many of you know that harvest is not just about reaping? You've got to sow. You've got to cultivate. You've got to water. There's things you've got to do. There's work to be done. It's not just about reaping. So it's important to know what season you're in that harvest cycle, in that process, using that metaphor. And let me just use this example from my own journey. Recently, actually about a year ago now, I came to realize that I've got a total of 10 books that are actively on the market, but I've probably written a total of about 20 books over the years. And I've had people ask me, how do you find time to write all these books? I'm talking about 20 books in the midst of all of your other responsibilities. And basically all of these books have come off the press since, all 20 of them, since about 2008. So 20 books in a relatively short period of time. People say, well, how do you produce all of that? I reaped a harvest that I've been sowing into for decades. Those 20 books, it wasn't like, oh, let me just do 20 books. No, I mean, for years and years and years, I've been doing research and writing and one draft after another. It just so happens I'm in a season of my life right now where I've probably got about 50 books on the back burner that I'm still just sowing a little bit here and there. And over time, I just need, with a little bit of extra effort, so just give me 3 days and I'll push this one out. Because I'll just go back and do what I've been working on for years and years and years. In about 3 to 7 days, I can usually push out a first draft of the next book. The point I'm making is that didn't happen. 20 books didn't happen overnight. It took a lifetime. I mean, some of the stuff we've been looking at represents a lifetime of work. There are things that every one of us have had in our hearts that we've been sowing into, things in our life for years and years and years. And you may have even felt like, is this going to amount to anything? Well, you've been sowing into fields that you just simply haven't reaped from yet. You're still sowing. You're still cultivating. You just haven't reached the season yet where it's time to reap. And we have multiple fields of harvest going on at the same time. Like I've got some fields I'm reaping in right now, such as the book situation. I've got other fields that I've been waiting for a harvest a whole long time and it hasn't come yet. I wish it was harvest time, but it's not yet. I'm still doing some work there, and I'm still waiting for the whole process. It's God that gives the increase. So you can have multiple areas of your life. I'm trying to encourage you today. There's some areas you may have already given up on. Hey, that seed's in the ground. You just keep watering it. You just keep cultivating. You just keep being obedient to God and just see what God does. Okay? So that's what I mean by embracing the laws of the harvest. When it comes to getting things done, understand that not everything has to be done today. Not everything can be done today. The winning of this town is going to take harvest mentality. Sowing and reaping, going through a winter time of dormancy, and the whole imagery of seasons is powerful when it comes to kingdom work. You've probably heard that imagery, of summer, fall, winter, spring. That, summertime represents that time of excitement and vitality, and say, come on, we're going to get some things done. You got the birth of vision going on. It's kind of like a planting time, and you say, hey, look, everybody's excited. This summer, spiritual summer we're in, and then you start noticing, oh, the leaves are changing color, and the things are drying up a bit, and oh, the autumn starts to set in a little bit, and you begin to question, is it really going to happen? What we thought would happen? And then winter comes. And now you guys are not like the northern cultures where we have severe winters. In the northern climates, everything looks dead. And it looks like nothing is going to happen. if you make the spiritual application. You begin to question and doubt. Was that really God that put that? Well, that was just us. Did we just come up with this idea to plant a church in Somerville? Was that just us? The temptation in the wintertime is, oh man, we need to cut down some dead trees. Look at all these dead trees. How many of you know winter, if you're in that kind of a climate, winter is not a good time to cut down dead trees. Why? Because they all look dead. You might be cutting down fruit trees that are ready to bear fruit this next season. And you don't know what's going to happen. Winter's not. In other words, do not make major life-altering decisions in the winter. So the seasons concept is important. Oh, I didn't get out of the winter, did I?
We're still dead. We're still dead.
You're still dead. I'm just going to leave you there. Maybe you'll invite me back and we'll talk about the springtime. Then the spring comes, you know what happens. It's a supernatural fulfillment of what God originally gave you. See, it's just one of the cycles. It's all throughout the Bible. Some describe it as the birth of vision, death of vision, then the supernatural fulfillment of the original vision. And it's just the way that God gets glory in it. That death of the seed concept is important in kingdom work. And we have to grasp that. Otherwise, we will give up. You know, so many people quit in the winter. You know, if you just hang in there, spring's coming. It's not always going to be this season. Seasonal thinking is important in kingdom work. Key 17 is avoid reverse delegation. Take time to read that. That just means if you delegate something out, don't let them throw it back on your plate. Key number 18 is do not micromanage. Come on, let's empower people to do the work. Key number 19 is prevent escalation of problems. I'm going to slow down on this one. You've heard the adage, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. You know, just create a culture around you that helps to prevent escalation of problems. Well, how do you do that? Part of it is create a culture of honor. You don't wait until problems start blowing up in your face before you try to create these cultures. It's at a time when people say, we want an environment here that looks like heaven. It's having a culture, values that mutually agreed upon. You talk about them a lot. We want to cultivate a culture of honor among us, and where we're esteeming the worth of every individual. We value that person, and we honor the gifting that's in them. And we focus on the gifting and the positive. Sometimes we get too focused on the negative about the other person. You don't have to tell me what the negatives are about me. I'm pretty much aware of most of them, probably. And I could make a list of my negative points from here to the moon. I mean, it'd be a big list. But the list of positive points about this guy is probably a shorter list. Probably get it on one side of one sheet of paper. And as I focus on other people, I want to glean that which is good and hold to the good and trust God with the rest. And take an approach with other people that's affirming of them. And sometimes you need to even overdo the affirmation a little bit. And the reason I say that is people tend to rise to the level of affirmation they receive. Make this your aim. Speak into people's lives in terms of affirmation one level above where they already are. At least one level above. It's got to be believable to them. And another part of empowerment as it relates to preventing escalation of problems, if you're in a supervisory role, empower the people within your part of the ministry to solve their own problems. Problems should be dealt with in the smallest circle possible, lowest level of authority as possible. If problems get brought too quickly to Pastor Jared's desk, senior leaders, then it begins to be perceived as a church-wide problem. When it could have been just dealt with in a small little circle. Deal with it there. You're empowering them to develop as Christians, as people. Key 26, follow favor. You know what I mean by favor, don't you? When it seems like things are really working right now. Right. Yeah. It's when it seems to be working. It's going good. Could be favor in a relationship, resources, and opportunities. Relationships, resources, and opportunities. Follow favor as far as it would take you. If God has given you favor in a certain relationship, just keep stewarding that relationship and just see where that goes. You know, it can be something for your benefit. It could be something for their benefit. Follow favor. If there's an open heart and open door, follow it as far as it would take you. Resources the same way. If God seems to be showing favor over a certain area of your resources, your finances or whatever, maybe it's an indication you need to keep doing it that way, whatever it is you were doing that was leading to an increase in that area. Okay? Opportunity. Not every opportunity should be taken advantage of. I'm talking about the opportunities that align with your mission, with your purpose, your focus. Okay? So we're moving on. Number 27 is tend to your own heart. See, the condition of your heart is going to impact all areas of your life. What do the Proverbs say? Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Or out of it flows the issues of life, or rivers of life. It's the imagery of the headwaters of a river. Guard those headwaters, because out of it is going to flow things that are going to influence every area of your life. Because that's the imagery of a river. Another image is the imagery of a garden. Tending to the garden, I think of it as an internal garden. When you have a greenhouse and you're tending to those plants, there's certain things you allow into that environment and there's other things you don't. The environmental conditions have to be just right. You can have too much water, too little water. Too much sunshine, too little sunshine. It's so many things have to be regulated. And so we need to be careful of what we're allowing in to our own hearts. There's certain insects that can get in there. You need to make sure you got those insects out. There are bugs that can get in to our own soul that affect our hearts. Your internal life is so important. Don't neglect it, please. The deception is that, I'm so busy in ministry and God understands. I felt the anointing when I led that worship set last week. So I must be doing good, even though I missed prayer time probably about 2 weeks in a row. It could be Brother Jared or any one of us. So any of us preachers in the room. I preached a good sermon. I didn't think I could do that good because I had kind of let up on my internal life. But I guess I'm okay. This I guess I'm okay thing. You know what that is? God loves those people you're ministering to so much that in spite of you, He's doing good to them. If not immediately, eventually, the condition of your heart is going to negatively impact what you're doing if you haven't tended to the heart. Finally, make love your operating system. The most important program on a computer is its operating system. The operating system on a computer is the program that runs all other programs. It's what receives the input. It guides how that input is utilized. It controls all the peripherals, the printers, and everything else. It sends output. And more sophisticated operating systems are responsible for security, guarding against intrusion, policing the activity of all the programs, ensuring that they're working harmoniously, without conflict, without adversely affecting the overall computer environment. So that's a computer operating system. Make love your operating system. Let it run all other aspects of your life and work. Love can monitor input and guide how it is used. Love can control peripheral matters and selectively determine the output, that which is outwardly expressed and produced. When love is present, there's a greater security for all who are involved. Love guards against intrusion, ensures harmony, and works through adversity in a way that benefits the overall environment. But unlike computer systems, love never fails. See, when we're functioning in love, it will prevent us from being self-serving in what we do. Loving God and loving people is not just something you do in church. It's a way that we live life, and it guides all that we pursue. So this final key is a good way for us to close out this study on productivity, kingdom productivity. And I'll say it again, love never fails. Here's the thing. If you love and your project fails, well, at least you've done the loving thing. If you love and your ministry department fails or the task didn't come out the way you thought it would, at least you've done the loving thing. And that in and of itself is an advancement of God's kingdom. It truly is.
Well, that wraps up our 4-part series on what matters most, delivered in Somerville, Georgia, in the leadership intensive that we conducted there at the Connect City Church. Thank you for joining us here on Kingdom Conversations. My prayer is that throughout this coming week, you will have a very productive week in the life of God's kingdom as you focus on what really matters most. God bless you.